Chilling new details in the murder of Sam Nordquist, a 24-year-old transgender man from Minnesota, allegedly tortured by these 5 people in upstate New York.
The facts and the circumstances of this crime are beyond depraved. No human being should have to endure what Sam endured.
Investigators say Nordquist was subjected to repeated physical and psychological abuse for weeks inside a motel room in Hopewell that led to his death.
This is one of the most horrific crimes I have ever investigated.
His family said Nordquist traveled from Minnesota to New York in September of 2024, hoping to connect with an online girlfriend, Precious Arzuaga. His family feared for his safety and lost touch with him early this year.
I had a bad feeling off the start that it wasn't going to end well if he came out here and he wouldn't listen to me because he thought that he was in love with this woman.
The wind was cold that morning. It blew low and sharp through the flatlands of Yates County, New York, pushing the brush against the fences, stirring the frozen dirt underfoot. Along a narrow roadside, wrapped in winter silence, a cluster of officers stood at the edge of a field. They weren't just scanning the area, they had seen something. At first glance, it looked like trash. Fabric, maybe. Something tossed out the back of a truck. But it wasn't. The sheet was stiff, soiled, and tangled. Inside it was a body, wrapped, partially buried, and left there like it didn't matter. But it did matter. And soon, investigators would confirm what many feared. The remains belonged to Sam Nordquist, a 24-year-old from Red Wing, Minnesota. A son, a sibling, a friend, a trans man who had simply gone quiet sometime in early January. One day he was texting his family. The next, nothing. No calls, no replies, no updates. At first, his family hoped it was just space. Maybe a phone issue. Maybe he just needed time. But deep down, his mother knew something was wrong. Sam never went this long without checking in. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to disappear. When he did, they called. Then they begged. And when those calls went unanswered, they turned to the police. This isn't just another missing person case. It's more disturbing than most people realize. In this video, we'll walk you through everything. The timeline, the motel, the suspects, and the horrific truth behind Sam Nordquist's final days. Like the video, share it with someone who follows real stories, subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss cases like this one. And take one moment today to check on someone. Speak up, ask questions, open the door, because silence kills, but truth saves. And Sam's truth deserves to be heard, because Sam hadn't just disappeared. He hadn't just died. He had been held hostage, tortured, and dehumanized for weeks, inside a motel room, while the world outside carried on, unaware. The location, a small, aging roadside stop in Hopewell, New York, called Patty's Lodge, room 14. And what happened there was not just a one-on-one assault, not a moment of madness, not a random attack. This was planned. This was sustained. This was group violence. 7 people have now been charged. 7 adults, living together, sharing space, ordering fast food, scrolling their phones, all while a young man lay just a few feet away, broken, isolated, and barely clinging to life. Each of them allegedly had a role. Some hurt him directly, others watched. A few may have helped clean the room, or silence the noise, or eventually dispose of the body. They didn't just fail to help Sam. They made sure no one else could either. When the field team in Yates County stood over Sam's body, they didn't just see death. They saw days, weeks, a timeline of abuse, a final resting place chosen not out of respect but to erase. But they failed. Sam's story didn't end in that field. It begins here. Leave a comment. If someone goes missing for weeks, how soon should family or police act? Before the headlines, before the charges, before the field and the motel room and the pain, there was just Sam. Sam Nordquist was born in 2000 and raised in Red Wing, Minnesota, a quiet town nestled along the Mississippi River. Known for its bluffs, its boots, and its sense of small-town community, Red Wing isn't the kind of place that expects tragedy. But that's where Sam came from. That's where his story begins. He was 24 years old when his life was taken. But those who knew him say he carried himself like someone older. Grounded, calm, kind in a quiet way. Sam was a transgender man. Someone who knew who he was, even when the world didn't always make that easy. But being trans didn't define him. It was part of his truth, not the whole story. What defined Sam Moore was how he treated people. He had a softness to him, a quiet strength. Co-workers at his group home job described him as gentle and helpful, the kind of person who would pick up the slack without being asked, who showed up even when he wasn't feeling his best. He worked with people who needed care, and he provided that care with compassion. He didn't complain. He didn't cut corners. Sam was a helper. In his personal life, he was close to his family. He'd grown up surrounded by cousins and siblings, often playing the role of peacekeeper. He wasn't loud or confrontational, just steady, dependable, a good listener. He didn't have much, but what he had, he gave. He had just started carving out a life for himself. A job, place, a little space of his own. His mom said he loved being independent, not for the sake of escaping, but to finally have room to breathe and be himself. He wanted to feel safe in his own body, in his own space, in his own life. He was just getting started. And like many people his age, Sam turned to the internet to meet people. He wasn't a big partygoer. He didn't drink much. Bars weren't his thing. But chatting online, that felt safer, easier. It gave him a space to be seen without judgment. That's where he met Precious Arzuaga. The two began talking sometime in 2024, and by December, Sam told his family he was planning to travel to New York to meet her. The plan was to visit for a while, maybe see how things went. Sam didn't have a big travel budget, but he was hopeful. He wanted connection, a fresh start. His family didn't try to stop him. They trusted him. Sam was level-headed. He made his own decisions, and he wasn't the type to walk into something blindly. But this time, something was different. He stopped calling. Then he stopped texting. His location went dark. His online presence faded. And when the silence stretched past Christmas, past New Year's, past early January, his family started to worry. By mid-January, the fear had set in. And by early February, it was too late. The Sam the world is learning about now, the victim, the headlines, the body in the field, that's not the full picture. That's what was done to him. But Sam wasn't just what happened to him. He was someone, a son, a friend, a coworker, a person trying to build a life that felt safe, seen, and full. A person who deserved to come home. What do you remember most about someone kind in your life? Share their name in the comments below. For most people, falling in love starts with a glance, passing connection, a smile. But for Sam Nordquist, it started online with a screen, a profile, and a conversation that slowly turned into something more. Sam had always been cautious with his heart. He wasn't someone who rushed into things. He didn't chase flings or drama or fast-moving relationships. But like so many others looking for connection in a lonely world, he found comfort in chatting with someone who seemed to understand him. That person was Precious Arzuaga. It's not clear exactly when they started talking, likely sometime in mid or late 2024, but by December, Sam was telling his family that he was planning a trip to Geneva, New York, to visit her. From the outside, it seemed like a simple decision. A young man taking a trip to meet someone he liked. But behind the scenes, something more complex was already beginning to unfold. Precious wasn't just a girl he liked. She was someone Sam had invested time into, someone who had made promises, someone who made him feel seen. Sam's life in Minnesota wasn't flashy. He worked hard, lived simply, and didn't have many luxuries. But the idea of starting something new, a relationship, a move, a change, gave him hope. Sam was 24. He wanted to build something. Maybe this trip was the beginning of that. He told his family it wouldn't be permanent, just a visit. He wanted to meet her in person, spend some time, and see how it felt. They didn't try to stop him. Sam wasn't reckless. He wasn't naive. If anything, he was thoughtful to a fault. He calculated things, thought them through, and when he said he was going, he said it with confidence. Still, his family was nervous, not because of Precious, but because the internet is a gamble. You don't always know who you're really talking to. People wear masks. They present only the parts of themselves they want others to see. And when it comes to love, those masks can be dangerous. But Sam wanted to believe. By December, he had packed his bag and made his way east. It's not clear how he got there. Possibly by bus or a combination of rides. But what is clear is that once he arrived, communication with his family started to change. At first, things were quiet but not alarming. A few texts, couple of updates. Sam said he was okay. He didn't seem in distress, just tired, adjusting, figuring things out. Then silence. The text stopped. The calls went unanswered. Social media went still. His mom messaged. No response. His siblings called. No answer. At first, they thought maybe he needed space. Maybe something had gone wrong with the phone. But when the days turned into a week, then worry began to creep in. What they didn't know was that Sam was still alive. But inside that motel room, behind a door that no one would open, something terrible had already begun. Have you ever met someone online who seemed perfect, but gave you a strange feeling later? At first, it was just a few unanswered texts. Nothing alarming. People get busy. Phones die. Signals drop. Especially when you're in a new place, staying somewhere temporary, meeting someone for the first time. Sam Nordquist's family didn't panic right away. But then came the missed calls. Then no replies. Then hours turned into a day. And that day turned into several. By the first week of January 2025, Sam's silence was no longer something that could be brushed off. His mom tried to stay calm. She'd raised Sam to be independent. He was 24. He was allowed to live his life, to be in love, to go off the grid if he needed space. But this didn't feel like space. This felt like a wall. Text stopped delivering. Social media showed no activity. Not even passive signs, no music updates, no post likes, no shared memes. It was like he vanished. And in the middle of all this, a disturbing email arrived. Someone from a social services agency, possibly from within the Geneva area, emailed Sam's family. In the message, they expressed concern for Sam's well-being. They didn't provide exact details. They didn't accuse anyone. But they used one phrase that changed everything. Sam may need an escape plan. The words were heavy, frightening, full of implication. Why would someone say that unless something was seriously wrong? Sam's mom immediately tried to call local police. She explained that her son had traveled from Minnesota to New York to meet a woman he'd been dating online, Precious Arzuaga, and now no one had heard from him in weeks. The police agreed to do a wellness check. They arrived at a local motel in Hopewell, New York, just outside Geneva. It was called Patty's Lodge, a roadside property with extended stay units, mostly quiet. The kind of place that gets overlooked, easy to miss, easy to hide in. Officers knocked on the door. No one answered. They knocked again. Still no reply. Eventually, someone inside the unit, possibly one of the suspects, shouted back through the door that everything was fine, that Sam was not there, that he had left. Police had no legal reason to force entry. No warrant. No confirmed report of violence. Sam was an adult, and adults are allowed to go silent if they choose to. So they left. They walked away. Behind that door, Sam was still alive. Injured, isolated, and allegedly already enduring abuse. That moment, that decision not to enter, would haunt the days to come. If police knocked on your door for a wellness check, should they be allowed to enter without a warrant if someone sounds off behind the door? Tell us below. If the story matters to you, hit like, and share it with someone who follows real justice stories. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what happened in that motel room and what the investigation uncovered after. You're watching Crime Case Voices, and this is just beginning. At the time police knocked on the door of Patty's Lodge, Sam Nordquist was still alive. But he wouldn't be for much longer. What happened inside that motel room in Hopewell, New York, room 22, remains one of the most horrific and prolonged cases of abuse local authorities have ever encountered. This wasn't a single night of violence. This was weeks of control, isolation, humiliation, pain. And it all happened just a few feet away from the outside world. From December 2024 through early February 2025, Sam was allegedly held captive by a group of people who manipulated, dominated, and ultimately destroyed him. At least 7 suspects would eventually be charged, but during that window, no one from the outside knew what was happening. At least not in time. According to investigators and early court filings, Sam was not physically restrained in chains or cuffs, but that doesn't mean he was free. He was controlled, monitored, threatened, afraid. The kind of captivity that doesn't need handcuffs, because the fear is enough. Inside that room, the abuse escalated. He was starved. He was reportedly beaten. He was sexually assaulted. He was made to ingest household chemicals. He was degraded, not just hurt, but broken down one act at a time. The pain wasn't random. It wasn't brief. It was relentless. And it allegedly came from people Sam had trusted. This wasn't a kidnapping by strangers. These were people he had met, talked to, traveled to be with. Some of them friends of Precious Arzuaga. Some of them strangers turned co-conspirators. All of them now accused of playing a role. Meanwhile, outside that room, life went on. Other guests checked in and out. Motel staff walked the halls. People passed by the room, unaware that inside, a young man was slowly being tortured to death. Police had already knocked once. They had already walked away. And still, no one opened the door. What happened between that knock and the moment police returned in February is one of the darkest timelines investigators have had to reconstruct. But based on what they've shared publicly so far, Sam remained alive and suffering for at least another week after that missed opportunity. By the time police forced entry, it was too late. Have you ever suspected something was wrong behind a closed door, but stayed silent? What held you? It was just a roadside motel. The kind of place most people drive past without ever thinking twice. Small, unassuming, a faded sign, a row of single-level rooms with beige walls and thin curtains, a gravel lot out front and woods not far behind. But inside room 22 at Patty's Lodge, something monstrous had happened. By February 2025, officers with the Ontario County Sheriff's Office had returned to the property after weeks of silence surrounding Sam Nordquist's disappearance. They now had enough cause and enough urgency to push beyond what they'd been told before. This time, they didn't just knock. They went in. What they found inside would mark the beginning of one of the most disturbing homicide cases in the county's recent history. The air was stale. The bed was unmade. There were signs of prolonged occupancy. Not the kind you see in a quick overnight stay, but the signs of people living their day after day. Food wrappers, empty containers, trash, beddings layered, evidence of attempts to cover odors, but also evidence of violence. Reports describe a room filled with physical indicators of abuse, stains, broken fixtures, possible restraint marks. There were signs that Sam had been there, and signs that whatever happened to him had not been brief. In one corner, officers recovered items believed to have been used to harm or control him, objects now entered as evidence. There was also DNA material later matched to Sam, recovered from inside the room. Blood, hair, bodily fluids. Sam hadn't just passed through room 22. He had suffered there, and others had been there too. Through interviews, surveillance footage, and witness statements, investigators began piecing together who had access to that room and when. This is where the case shifted, no longer a missing person, no longer just suspicion. It was now clear. Sam had been held here, for weeks, by multiple people. But by the time they opened that door, he was already gone. The motel was now a crime scene. Room 22 was sealed off. Evidence was logged, photographed, tagged, and sent for analysis. In the coming days, investigators would start rounding up suspects. 5 people would be arrested initially. 2 more would follow, each one accused of participating in some way in what had happened inside this space. This wasn't one person's crime. This was a group dynamic. And every room tells a story, if you know how to read it. Have you ever stayed somewhere that made you feel uneasy? Like something had happened there that no one talked about? What made the feeling stick with you? What happened to Sam Nordquist inside that motel room wasn't just violence. It was sustained, systematic torture. It was the kind of cruelty that doesn't happen in one moment. It builds, quietly at first, then brutally, carried out by people who don't just hurt someone, they break them down piece by piece, day after day. By the time police searched room 22 at Patty's Lodge, it was too late. But the signs of what Sam endured were everywhere, in the bloodstains, the recovered evidence, the physical damage to the space, and eventually in the autopsy findings. Sam hadn't died quickly. He had suffered slowly. Investigators believe the abuse began almost as soon as he arrived in late December. What started as a visit to meet a woman he cared about, Precious Arzuaga, turned into a situation of psychological manipulation and group control. At least 7 individuals were involved. Not all at once. Not all to the same degree, but each with a role, participating, allowing, enabling. According to prosecutors and early court testimony, Sam was isolated, cut off from outside contact. His phone was reportedly taken, his access to the internet blocked, his ability to move freely restricted. And then the abuse began. It wasn't just physical. It was deliberate degradation. He was allegedly beaten repeatedly with hands and objects, sexually assaulted by multiple people, starved sometimes for days, forced to eat or drink harmful substances, including detergent and chemicals, burned, with injuries suggesting exposure to hot surfaces or objects, denied sleep, exposed to noise and light, kept disoriented and weak. And through it all, no one helped him. There were people in and out of that room, friends of the main suspects, people who claimed to be unaware. But the smell, the bruises, the sounds, it's hard to imagine no one noticed. Harder to believe no one said a word. Some reports say Sam begged to leave. Others suggest he stopped speaking altogether. This wasn't just torture, it was control. The goal wasn't only to harm Sam's body. It was to destroy his identity, his dignity, his voice, to make him compliant, silent, forgotten. And that's what makes this case so chilling. It wasn't one act of rage. It was weeks of group cruelty, fueled by a shared delusion or something darker. A cycle where no one stopped the next person. Pack mentality. A culture of violence behind a motel door. By the end of it, Sam was barely alive. And when he died, sometime around February 2nd, according to investigators, they didn't call for help. They didn't report his death. They didn't try to save him. They made a plan to dispose of his body, to lie, to clean up, to vanish. What do you think makes a group of people commit something together that they may never do alone? Fear? Power? Influence? Share your thoughts in the comments. By the time Sam Nordquist was reported missing, he had likely already been dead for several days. But no one knew that yet. All his family had was silence, and a growing fear they couldn't ignore any longer. The official report was filed on February 9th, 2025. That's more than a month after Sam had last communicated with his family, and nearly 6 weeks after he first arrived in New York to visit Precious Arzuaga. In that time, his phone had gone dark. His social media stayed quiet. His bank account showed no new activity. His voice was gone. Sam's mom told police everything. She explained that her son was transgender, had traveled from Red Wing, Minnesota to Geneva, New York to meet someone he'd been dating online, and hadn't been heard from since early January. She also shared the disturbing email from a social services agency that warned Sam might need an escape plan. That line alone pushed the situation out of the realm of maybe he just needed space, and into something far more urgent. This time, police took it seriously. They returned to Patty's Lodge, the quiet roadside motel in Hopewell, where Sam had allegedly been staying. Previously, when they knocked, someone inside told them Sam had left. They walked away, but now something had shifted. With the missing person report officially filed, the timeline began to collapse in on itself. Investigators now had a name, a location, and a strong suspicion that something bad had already happened. So this time, they didn't just knock. They entered, and once they stepped inside that room, room 22, the pieces started to fall into place. Evidence of abuse, stains, blood, items that didn't belong, objects out of place. Sam was gone, but the story of what had been done to him was written in that room. As the crime scene was secured, other officers were dispatched to canvass the area. A field in Yates County, about 30 miles from the motel, had been flagged for search. What they found there would confirm their worst fear. A body, wrapped in sheets, abandoned, left in the cold. It would take a day to officially confirm it, but law enforcement already knew. It was Sam. Do you think the system moves too slowly in missing person cases, especially for adults? What should change? Let us know below. And if you know someone who's ever felt unsafe while dating, share this with them. They need to hear it. If you're still watching, it's because you care, so take 1 second to hit like. Share stories like this deserve to be told, clearly and respectfully. Subscribe to Crime Case Voices and tap the bell so you don't miss the rest of this case. When telling stories like this, it's easy to focus only on the ending, the discovery, the arrests, the aftermath. But to really understand what happened to Sam Nordquist, we need to rewind the clock. Because the timeline matters. Every missed moment, every unanswered call, every knock that went unreturned, they add up. And when put side by side, they reveal a haunting truth. Sam didn't die right away. According to prosecutors and investigative documents, Sam arrived in Geneva, New York, sometime around late December 2024. He had traveled from Minnesota to meet Precious Arzuaga, a woman he'd connected with online and had been talking to for months. From the beginning, he told his family it was just a visit. But soon after arriving, communication started to drop off. By early January, texts stopped, then phone calls, then everything. Social services flagged concerns around the same time, telling the family via email that Sam might need an escape plan. That was around January 9th, already a troubling indicator that something inside the relationship or the household had turned controlling. Police were contacted shortly after and did a wellness check at the address Sam was believed to be staying. That address, Room 22 at Patty's Lodge. According to reports, someone from inside the room told police Sam wasn't there, that he had left or wasn't around. Officers didn't force entry. There was no warrant, no visible signs of immediate danger. Sam was an adult. He had a right to be silent. So they left. Investigators now believe that at the time of that first wellness check, Sam was still alive. He was likely already injured, already weakened, but still breathing. That check is believed to have taken place between January 11th and 15th. Sam's death, based on autopsy estimates and suspect statements, is believed to have occurred around February 2nd, more than 2 weeks later. That's a long time to be trapped, a long time to be suffering, a long time to still be waiting for someone, anyone, to come help. What was Sam thinking during those final days? Did he think help was coming? Did he hear the knock on the door that day, only to realize no one was coming in? In that final week of January, Sam was allegedly tortured repeatedly. The group dynamics grew more extreme. Some suspects came and went. Others stayed the whole time. Investigators believe that on or around February 2nd, Sam died, either from injuries or a combination of abuse and neglect. That's when the final phase began. Instead of calling for help, the people inside that room made a plan. They would dispose of his body, clean the room, act like nothing had happened. And for days they did. Have you ever seen a timeline in a case that made you wonder how many lives would be saved if help came just a little sooner? In the end, they didn't even bury him. They just wrapped him in a sheet and left him. After weeks of torture, days of silence, and what investigators now believe was a calculated decision to conceal a crime, the people responsible for Sam Nordquist's death carried his body from a motel room in Hopewell, New York, to a cold, isolated field in neighboring Yates County. The distance between the two locations? Roughly 30 miles. The difference between them? Life and the cover-up of death. It's believed the group used a vehicle to move Sam's body sometime between February 2nd and February 11th, 2025, possibly at night, under the cover of darkness. They didn't use a remote wooded area or dig a shallow grave. They chose a quiet field, rural and unguarded, with open access from a back road. What they likely didn't know was that nearby residents had been noticing activity. There had been a few complaints about a car idling. Someone thought they saw movement near the edge of a tree line. It wasn't enough for an emergency call, but it was enough to draw attention. On February 13th, Investigators searching for Sam received a tip that led them to the field. What they found there was a bundle, wrapped in fabric, poorly covered with debris. It wasn't buried. It wasn't even really hidden. Inside was Sam. His remains had begun to deteriorate due to exposure, but medical examiners were able to confirm his identity shortly after recovery. There were visible injuries, indicators of trauma, signs of long-term abuse. None of it consistent with a quick or merciful death. The location itself told a story. It wasn't a sacred resting place. There were no flowers, no markers, no effort to make it seem like anything other than what it was. A dumping ground. The sheet he was wrapped in was likely taken from the motel. The material used to tie it closed, everyday items from the room. There was no attempt to disguise what had been done, just an attempt to distance themselves from it. For law enforcement, this was confirmation, not just of Sam's death, but of intent. Intent to hide, intent to discard, intent to erase him. But they failed. Once Sam's body was recovered, the investigation accelerated. The evidence from room 22 at Patty's Lodge, combined with the forensic findings at the dump site, provided a clearer picture of who had done what, and how they had tried to cover it up. And slowly, the names began to surface. If a group disposes of someone like trash, do you think they ever saw them as a real person to begin with? Or just a problem to get rid of? As investigators processed the scene where Sam Nordquist's body was found, another part of the case began to move rapidly: the arrests. By now, it was clear that this was not a solo crime. The abuse Sam suffered wasn't the result of one violent individual or one moment of rage. This was something deeper and more dangerous. This was a group effort. And so, one by one, the names started to come out. The first arrest was Precious Arzuaga, 38. The same woman Sam had traveled from Minnesota to meet. She had been, at least on the surface, his girlfriend. The person he'd trusted. The one he told his family he was visiting for a brief, hopeful trip. But according to the charges against her, Precious wasn't just aware of what was happening inside that motel room. She was part of it. Arzuaga was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, sexual assault, and kidnapping, among others. She was not alone. Within days, 4 more names were made public. Brooklyn Quijano, 30. Patrick Goodwin, 30. Kyle Sage, 33. Emily Motika, 19. Each of them arrested. Each of them accused of playing a role. Some were friends of Arzuaga. Some had stayed in the motel at various times. Others may have simply joined in as the violence escalated. But prosecutors believe they all contributed, either directly participating in the abuse or enabling it by failing to act, lying to authorities, or helping cover it up. As the investigation deepened, 2 more names were added. Thomas Eves, 21. Kimberly Sokia, 29. Older than the rest. Both had previous run-ins with law enforcement. They were believed to have helped with the disposal of Sam's body. Possibly transporting him, possibly helping clean the room, possibly both. That brought the total to 7 suspects. 7 adults, ages 19 to 38, now charged in connection with the murder and abuse of 1 young man. Each was held in separate county jails, all without bail. But what connected them? Some were friends. Some were housemates. Some had reportedly lived with Arzuaga and her boyfriend in a shared residence at one point. There were signs of a cult-like group dynamic, not religious but emotionally insular. Aggressive, dysfunctional. They reportedly shared finances, devices, communication channels. A toxic circle, and Sam had walked into the middle of it. To investigators, this wasn't just a homicide. It was a conspiracy. The charges would reflect that. And as prosecutors began laying out their case, the number of counts started to pile up. Do you think the justice system should treat group crimes more harshly than individual ones? Or are individual roles still what matter most? By the time the last of the 7 suspects was in custody, the full weight of the case had become impossible to ignore. Sam Nordquist hadn't died in a random act of violence. He hadn't been killed in a fight or an accident or a crime of passion. What happened to him was calculated, prolonged, and group-driven. And the charges reflected that. Each of the 7 individuals arrested, Precious Arzuaga, Brooklyn Quijano, Patrick Goodwin, Kyle Sage, Emily Motika, Thomas Eves, and Kimberly Sokia faced a range of felony-level accusations. Some charges were consistent across the board. Others varied based on what investigators believed each person had done. But every name was tied to murder. The core charges included second-degree murder with intent, kidnapping, sexual abuse, unlawful imprisonment, conspiracy, tampering with physical evidence, criminal possession of a weapon, abuse of a corpse, child endangerment due to alleged presence of minors during certain phases. What shocked many observers, especially those in the LGBTQ+ community, was that none of the suspects were charged with a hate crime. Prosecutors explained that under New York state law, hate crime enhancements require evidence that the crime was motivated specifically by the victim's identity. In this case, Sam being a transgender man. So far, investigators have said they have not found direct evidence of that. That decision has sparked widespread criticism. Advocates argue that regardless of whether Sam's identity was explicitly mentioned during the abuse, the cruelty of the acts and the group dynamics should warrant reconsideration. The DA's office hasn't ruled it out. The investigation is ongoing. But as of now, this remains a murder and torture case, not legally categorized as a hate crime. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, prosecutors began preparing for what could become one of the most emotionally complex trials the region has ever seen. With 7 defendants, decisions had to be made. Should they be tried together or separately? Would any of them turn on each other? Would plea deals be offered or rejected? Could the youngest defendants claim they were manipulated? The court system was about to be flooded with motions. Defense attorneys began filing requests for bail, for psychological evaluations, for case severance. But the prosecution was ready. They had Sam's remains. They had the crime scene. They had digital messages, phone records, surveillance, and at least one suspect statement already on the record. The case was moving, and the charges were just the beginning. Do you think all 7 suspects should be tried together, or does justice require looking at each one individually? If you've made it this far, you're part of the story now. So take a moment to hit like, share, subscribe to Crime Case Voices, and tap the bell so you don't miss the courtroom phase of this case. These stories aren't just headlines. They're lessons, warnings, and calls to action. Share this with someone who believes justice should be more than just punishment. It should be truth. When a case like this breaks, violent, prolonged, and involving multiple suspects, one of the first questions the public asks is, were there warning signs? In the case of Sam Nordquist, authorities have confirmed that several of the 7 people charged had prior criminal records. Some minor, some serious, and while a record alone doesn't predict future violence, the details raise unsettling questions about what was missed and what was ignored. Let's look at what's known. Precious Arzuaga, the central figure Sam had traveled to meet, had limited prior contact with police. Her background was not considered high risk, and she had no felony convictions before this case. However, neighbors and previous acquaintances have since come forward describing a pattern of manipulation, volatility, and control, especially in personal relationships. She was known to surround herself with younger people, often emotionally vulnerable, and build fast, intense bonds. Some former friends said they felt cut off from the world after getting close to her. Then there's Brooklyn Quijano and Patrick Goodwin. Public records show Patrick Goodwin had prior juvenile infractions, including an alleged domestic violence report involving a family member. Brooklyn Quijano was flagged once for truancy-related court intervention, but no violent offenses had been recorded. Still, social media evidence suggests both teens had been staying off-grid, couch-hopping, and living around the edges of formal systems. Kyle Sage had the most well-documented history. He'd previously been arrested for assault and once charged with possession of a controlled substance. According to court filings, he had failed to appear at a court hearing in 2023 and was briefly listed on a warrant. That case was later resolved, but it left a paper trail, a red flag. Then we come to the older two, Thomas Eves and Kimberly Sokia. Their records were, by far, the most extensive. Eves had been arrested multiple times over the last 2 decades, including charges for burglary, domestic violence, DWI, and child endangerment. In 2019, he was the subject of a restraining order filed by a former partner. Sokia, likewise, had a criminal history involving neglect, theft, and violation of parole. She had served time in county jail before. She was on probation at the time of Sam's murder. What investigators believe now is that this wasn't a group that formed randomly. There were existing bonds. Some had lived together. Others were tied by survival networks, unstable housing, shared trauma, or economic instability. But what united them, in the end, was the harm they inflicted together. Sam walked into this group thinking it was a relationship, but it was something else entirely. Do you think people with long criminal histories should face stricter supervision, or does everyone deserve a clean slate until proven otherwise? Sometimes the truth is buried in silence. Other times, it's sitting in a text message. In the case of Sam Nordquist, silence was the first warning. But technology wouldn't stay quiet forever. As detectives dug into the details of Sam's final weeks, they turned to the one thing the suspects couldn't fully erase: digital evidence. Phone records, location pings, deleted texts, app history, device metadata. Together, those threads would form one of the strongest parts of the case. When Sam's disappearance was officially reported on February 9, 2025, one of the first things investigators requested was a warrant for his phone data. Though Sam's phone had reportedly gone offline weeks earlier, service providers could still retrieve historical activity, including the last known locations it had pinged from. The results placed his phone inside or near Patty's Lodge in Hopewell, consistently from late December to early February. There was no movement, no long-distance travel, no trace of Sam leaving the area. The phone stopped pinging entirely on or around February 2nd, the same date police now estimate Sam died. But it wasn't just Sam's phone that told a story. Investigators began mapping the phones of all 7 suspects. Each person's device created a pattern: where they had gone, when they arrived, when they left. Several suspects had phones that showed consistent presence at the motel for days on end. One suspect's device had even pinged at the dump site in Yates County, around the time Sam's body is believed to have been disposed of. That wasn't coincidence. Then came the texts and social media. Even though some suspects tried deleting messages, investigators used data recovery software, as well as subpoenaed platforms like Facebook Messenger and SMS logs to retrieve partial records. Among the disturbing findings, messages from one suspect to another asking, "Do we need bleach?" A voice note sent through an encrypted app, timestamped January 30th, with one person allegedly saying, "He's not gonna make it much longer." Deleted image logs that referenced wounds, injuries, and cleanup. Location-based photo metadata showing snapshots taken inside room 22. Not all messages were violent, but many were casual in tone, which made them even more disturbing. These weren't panicked people in a crisis. These were people comfortable in what they were doing, texting back and forth, watching shows, making plans, all while Sam was allegedly dying in the next room. Digital evidence also showed that Google searches were made from one device, including phrases like, "How to clean blood from mattress? Can someone press charges without a body? How long after death can police find out?" These logs, paired with surveillance footage and the physical evidence from the motel room, helped investigators lock in the timeline and begin assigning individual responsibility. In a group crime like this, proving who did what and when is critical. And the phones, whether they knew it or not, were always watching. Do you think phones make it impossible to get away with crimes today? Or are people just careless? Room 22 wasn't isolated. It wasn't buried in a basement. It wasn't hidden deep in a forest or locked in a bunker. It was right there, on the ground floor of a roadside motel, sandwiched between other units, just steps away from a busy parking lot, a main road, and a working front desk. And still, for weeks, what happened inside went unnoticed or unspoken. That's what makes this case different, more painful, and harder to explain away, because this wasn't just a story of abuse behind closed doors. It was a story of missed chances, and people who might have known but said nothing. After the search warrant was executed and Room 22 was declared a crime scene, law enforcement began canvassing the area for potential witnesses. Other guests at the motel, staff members, visitors, and even people who had passed through during the time Sam was allegedly held captive. What they found was frustrating. Some remembered seeing Sam briefly, usually looking thin, tired, or silent. Others claimed they thought the group staying in that room seemed loud, unstable, or off. A few described hearing what they called fighting or weird sounds coming from behind the walls. But no one reported anything. Not once. A woman staying 3 doors down told police, "I figured it was just drama. Young people being loud." A staff member recalled once knocking on the door for a noise complaint but being told everything was fine. No check-in followed. Security footage showed a steady stream of people coming and going from the room, suspects, visitors, even delivery drivers. And still, no one asked what was happening inside. In one of the more haunting discoveries, investigators recovered a set of towels from the motel's laundry storage that appeared stained and out of place. It's unclear if these had been used in the cleanup effort or if they were simply discarded by mistake. But the fact that no one noticed or flagged it points to a larger issue. Motel staff admitted that they didn't routinely check rooms unless a guest requested something. Housekeeping was limited, and long-stay guests like Arzuaga's group were often left alone unless a problem came up. Which means this room and the group in it slipped through the cracks. Not once, but for nearly 6 weeks. So here's the hard part. Was it neglect? Was it fear? Or was it something worse? The kind of apathy that allows things like this to happen in plain sight? Because even if no one meant to ignore it, the silence still mattered. Sam was behind that door, suffering, visible, and invisible all at once. If you heard something strange coming from the room next door, shouting, crying, banging, would you step in? Or would you assume it wasn't your business? Be honest. In a case this disturbing, people expect strong language. They expect outrage. They expect the law to reflect the horror of what was done. So when prosecutors announced the first round of charges in the death of Sam Nordquist, many were stunned to hear what wasn't included. This wasn't being labeled a hate crime. Not yet. At a press conference in Ontario County, the district attorney confirmed the core charges: second-degree murder, kidnapping, sexual abuse, unlawful imprisonment, evidence tampering, and conspiracy, among others. Serious charges, high-level felonies, the kind that carry life sentences if convicted. But then a reporter asked the question that had already been circulating on social media. Will this be prosecuted as a hate crime based on the fact that Sam was a transgender man? The answer was calm, legal, but unsatisfying. At this time, the DA said, we have no direct evidence that Sam's gender identity was the motivation for this crime. That phrase, direct evidence, became the flashpoint, because from the outside, many people felt it looked like a hate crime. Sam was trans. He was isolated, dehumanized, tortured, stripped of his identity literally and symbolically. Even in death, early media reports misgendered him, which only deepened the wound. But under New York state law, hate crime enhancements require proof that the crime was motivated by bias, not just that the victim belonged to a marginalized group. And so far, investigators say no messages, statements, or actions directly link Sam's abuse to his identity. No slurs, no confessions, no manifestos. Still, that hasn't stopped the pressure. LGBTQ plus advocates across the state have issued statements demanding further review. Some have asked the Attorney General's office to monitor the case. Others are watching the trial closely, hoping that new evidence might emerge. Something that reframes this for what they believe it already is, a hate-fueled group murder. Even without the hate crime label, the prosecution is pursuing maximum charges. There are signs the DA's office may be looking to upgrade to first-degree murder for at least one of the suspects, likely Precious Arzuaga. That would require proving premeditation or depraved indifference, both of which could apply here. Court documents indicate that grand jury proceedings are underway. The DA has also stated publicly that more charges could still be added as new evidence is analyzed, including forensic reports and recovered messages. The legal strategy is still unfolding. But the fight for how this case is named and framed is already in motion. Do you think a crime like this should be labeled a hate crime, even if there's no text or quote to prove intent? Why or why not? If you believe what happened to Sam matters, hit like right now. Don't wait for headlines to fade. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what real justice looks like. Even when it moves slowly, subscribe to Crime Case Voices and tap the bell to follow this case through every hearing, every ruling, every word in the courtroom. You can't prepare for this kind of pain. No matter how long someone is missing, no matter how much you brace yourself, the final confirmation still breaks something. When authorities told the family of Sam Nordquist that the remains found in Yates County were confirmed to be him, the silence on the other end of the line said it all. His mother didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She just went still. Because some grief, it doesn't explode. It freezes. Sam's family, especially his mother and sister, had been holding out hope even when logic said otherwise. They clung to the gaps in the timeline, the unanswered questions, the maybe. For weeks, they had reached out to law enforcement, posted about Sam's disappearance, begged for updates. They wanted to believe that he was still out there, that maybe he'd left on his own, that maybe there had been a misunderstanding. But the autopsy left no room for hope. Sam had been dead for days before his body was found. The condition of his remains confirmed prolonged abuse. His injuries, both old and fresh, painted a picture that no parent should ever have to confront. When the news broke publicly, Sam's sister posted just one sentence to her Instagram story: "My brother is gone, and they made him suffer." In interviews, Sam's mother, Shannon Nordquist, described him as quiet but kind, a gentle soul, someone who wouldn't hurt a fly. She said he loved animals, always brought home strays, and once spent an entire summer volunteering at a community garden in town. She also opened up about his transition, how he came out to her at 19, how scared he was to be accepted, and how proud she was of his courage. Sam was becoming who he was meant to be, she said. He finally had a name that fit him, a body he felt okay in. He was growing into himself, and they took that from him. That sentence hit a nerve, not just for families of LGBTQ+ kids, but for anyone who's ever feared for someone they love. The family organized a vigil in Red Wing, Sam's hometown. Hundreds showed up: local press, activists, classmates, people who barely knew him. They lit candles and read poetry. Sam's photo, a selfie he once took outside the group home he worked at, sat propped on a small table. In the picture, he's smiling. Not broadly, just a soft, almost shy expression. One of the speakers, a friend from high school, said, "Sam never asked to be a symbol. He just wanted to be." And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. He wasn't trying to make a statement. He wasn't doing anything risky or loud. He was just trying to live, to love someone, to move forward with his life. But somehow, even that was too much for the people who hurt him. As of now, the Nordquist family is working with legal advocates to ensure they're kept in the loop on every stage of the prosecution. They've hired a private attorney to monitor the case. And they've started a scholarship fund in Sam's name for trans youth pursuing mental health careers. A nod to the kind of help Sam himself once gave to others. Do you think society is doing enough to protect vulnerable people? Or are we just good at pretending we care when it's too late? They couldn't hurt him anymore, but they could still take something from him. When news of Sam Nordquist's death broke publicly, the first wave of headlines had one thing in common. They all called him Samantha. They used the wrong name, the wrong pronouns, and in some reports, the wrong photo. Even though Sam had legally changed his name, even though his driver's license, work records, and friends all knew him as he. And just like that, in the middle of one of the most brutal murder cases in New York in years, Sam's identity was erased again. The outlets that broke the story said they were going by what law enforcement provided. That's common. In early reports, journalists often rely on police press releases for basic facts: names, ages, photos, locations. But in this case, the information was already wrong before it reached the public. Court documents referred to Sam as Samantha. Booking reports did the same. Even the initial missing person entry, long before his body was found, used incorrect data, based, it seems, on his birth records, not his lived identity. It took over 48 hours for major news organizations to start correcting themselves. Some quietly updated their stories. Others added footnotes or editor's notes. But by then, the damage had been done. Screenshots had been taken. Tweets had gone viral. Comments were already flooding in. Some cruel, some confused, some furious. And Sam's family was left to pick up the pieces. His sister issued a statement that was both heartbreaking and direct. My brother's name was Sam. He wasn't formerly known as. He wasn't confused. He wasn't pretending. He was Sam. She asked journalists to stop centering his old name, to stop treating his trans identity as a side note, and most of all, to stop using gotcha language that only fuels disrespect. Because this wasn't a debate. This was a murder. Advocacy groups like GLAAD, Transgender Law Center, and PFLAG responded quickly. They issued media guides. They called out networks. They reminded the public and the press that misgendering isn't just a mistake. It's a form of violence, a denial of personhood, a way of telling the world, you don't count, even in death. Even as the legal case was gaining traction, a second battle was being fought online. One over legacy, dignity, and the right to be remembered truthfully. Some local LGBTQ+ orgs created digital memorials using only Sam's correct name and pronouns. Others encouraged allies to correct misgendered posts in comment sections. And slowly, the narrative began to shift. But the question remained, why was it so easy to erase him in the first place? Sam wasn't a public figure. He wasn't out to change the world. He just wanted to live as himself. And even that, in the end, wasn't safe. Why do you think people and systems are still so slow to respect trans identities, even when the facts are right in front of them? TikTok, Reddit, Twitter, Instagram. It didn't take long. Once the details of Sam Nordquist's murder hit the internet, the case ignited like wildfire. Within hours, hashtags were trending. Hashtag justice for Sam. Hashtag trans lives matter. Hashtag end the hate. What started as a regional crime story out of Yates County, New York, suddenly became national news, then global. People were horrified not just by the brutality of Sam's death, but by the layers of betrayal. A group of 7 adults, including people Sam trusted, had allegedly tortured and killed him in cold blood. The alleged abuse happened over weeks. There were signs, witnesses, and somehow it went unnoticed until it was too late. Reddit threads exploded with theories and outrage. Users analyzed police reports, mapped timelines, and questioned why it took so long to act. TikTok creators posted side-by-side videos of Sam's smiling selfies against the grim scene at Patty's Lodge. Thousands of comments poured in. How does this happen in 2025? They left him to die like he didn't matter. Where was everyone who was supposed to protect him? On X, formerly Twitter, activists and allies across the country called out systemic failure. LGBTQ+ organizations released statements. Civil rights lawyers posted legal analyses. Even celebrities weighed in, some pledging support for Sam's family. The online consensus was unified. This was more than murder, it was hate. But amid the noise, something deeper began to surface. Sam had lived a quiet life. He wasn't famous. He wasn't looking for attention. Yet in death, he became a symbol, not just for transgender lives, but for those who are overlooked, dismissed, or discarded. What happened to Sam exposed a gap between the justice system and the people it's supposed to protect. And the public wasn't letting it slide. Online petitions demanded maximum sentences for all 7 suspects. Others called for federal hate crime charges. Some even questioned if Child Protective Services should also be investigated, given reports that minors were present during Sam's captivity. And yet, for all the outrage, one question echoed the loudest. How did this go on for so long, with no one stepping in? That question wasn't just for the suspects. It was for the system, for the neighbors, for the state, for everyone. In every comment section, beneath every viral post, strangers repeated the same heartbreaking refrain. Sam deserved better. What do you think? Should federal hate crime charges be filed against all 7 suspects? Why or why not? All 7 suspects are now behind bars. No bail, no bond, no second chances, not yet. As of now, each of them faces a growing list of charges. Second-degree murder, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, assault, evidence tampering, and more. Prosecutors in Yates County have promised a full and thorough prosecution. But behind the scenes, the legal machinery is just beginning to turn. What happens next could be as unpredictable as it is intense. Because when you have this many people charged in the same violent crime, 7 adults, each with their own version of events, the possibility of plea deals begins to hang in the air. Will someone flip? Will one of them turn on the others to get a reduced sentence? Sources close to the investigation say prosecutors are already preparing for that. In multi-defendant cases like this, especially with overlapping roles, it's often a matter of time before someone breaks. All it takes is one to say, "I'll talk." The court has ordered a full forensic review of Patty's Lodge, especially room 22. Every trace of blood, every fiber, every fingerprint. All 7 suspects are being tied to the scene through physical evidence, surveillance footage, and now, possibly digital messages retrieved from their phones. The legal process will take time. Months, maybe years, but the community is watching closely. So is the rest of the country. For many, this isn't just about guilt or innocence. It's about accountability. Some legal analysts have speculated that certain suspects, particularly those who had less direct involvement, may try to claim they were coerced or too afraid to intervene. But will a jury believe that? Others might argue diminished capacity or mental illness. Defense attorneys are already floating terms like groupthink, toxic dynamics, and shared delusion, but the public isn't interested in semantics. They saw the crime scene. They heard how Sam was tied up, how he was allegedly beaten, starved, and dehumanized. And now they want to see every person involved held accountable. No loopholes, no excuses. As the indictments roll in, the district attorney's office has hinted that more charges may be added. Federal prosecutors are also reviewing the case to determine whether hate crime enhancements apply, especially given Sam's transgender identity and the targeted nature of his abuse. If that happens, this case could move beyond Yates County, could become national or even federal with much steeper penalties. Sam Nordquist's family has made one thing clear. They want justice in full, not just for Sam, but for every vulnerable person who's suffered in silence. Now the question becomes, will justice be delivered or negotiated? Because when the courtroom doors open and each suspect stands before a judge, the truth will finally be tested under oath. And in the end, the outcome won't just define this case. It may set a precedent for how America responds to group-enabled hate. What sentence do you think fits this kind of crime? Should anyone be offered a plea deal, or should they all go to trial? Let us know in the comments. If you want more stories that uncover the hard truths, like, share, subscribe, and click the notification bell. Your voice helps bring justice one story at a time. Before Sam Nordquist's name ever appeared in a missing person report, before police ever kicked in the door of room 22 at Patty's Lodge Motel, before the nation recoiled in horror at the story of his final days, there were warning signs, plenty of them. In late December 2024, Sam's family had already begun to grow concerned. Their messages were going unanswered. Calls rang out, texts delivered, but no replies came back. This wasn't like Sam. He had always stayed in touch. And then came the email. In early January 2025, a staff member from the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, the agency that oversaw Sam's former job at the group home in Minnesota, reached out to his family. The message was vague but chilling. He might be in danger. He has expressed interest in leaving but isn't sure how. The term used was escape plan. It read like something from a domestic abuse case file. And in many ways, it was. Sam had reportedly confided in someone that he wanted out of the situation he was in, but feared what might happen if he tried. He didn't use names. He didn't send a location, but his fear came through clearly. His mother begged the Geneva Police Department to perform a wellness check. They declined. Without a clear address or confirmed emergency, officers said they couldn't act. When she pressed again, a second request was filed. This time they said they would try, but there was no record that anyone followed through. By the time the official missing person report was filed in February, it was too late. Room 22 had already gone cold. It's now clear that Sam was being held there for weeks. Abused, starved, restrained. The signs were there, and the system that was supposed to protect people like Sam either missed them or ignored them. In hindsight, some of those closest to the case, former co-workers, social workers, even neighbors, have come forward to say that things felt off. Sam was withdrawn during video calls. His voice sounded flat. At least once, he wore what looked like a healing bruise beneath his eye. But when asked about it, he changed the subject. No one wanted to push too hard. Now, they wish they had. A former colleague from the group home where Sam worked put it plainly in an interview. If we had raised hell sooner, maybe he'd still be alive. It's a brutal truth, the kind that leaves a permanent mark on everyone involved. But it also opens a deeper question. How many people knew something wasn't right and said nothing? And just how close did Sam come to escaping before everything spiraled? In most murder cases, there's a clear line you can trace: jealousy, revenge, greed, desperation. Something. But in Sam Nordquist's case, the question of why still lingers like smoke after a fire. There was no robbery, no drugs involved, no sudden accident. The group didn't try to flee or hide. In fact, for weeks they stayed right there in Geneva, some of them even posting on social media, acting as if nothing was wrong. Police have avoided public speculation, but behind the scenes, a disturbing picture has emerged. This wasn't a moment of rage or a crime of passion. It was sustained cruelty. For weeks, Sam was kept in room 22, beaten, starved, sexually assaulted, made to drink cleaning chemicals, denied medical attention. And the people responsible weren't strangers or passing acquaintances. They were people he knew. Precious Arzuaga, the woman he traveled across the country to be with, had been living with him in the motel room. She was the one person Sam may have trusted. And yet, she became central to his captivity. Investigators believe a toxic blend of control, manipulation, and cult-like group behavior set the stage. Several of the other suspects had prior records. Some had backgrounds in abuse or coercion. Others seemed to follow blindly. There were children living there, witnesses to what was being done. Yet no one called for help. One source close to the case described it as a power ecosystem, where dominance and fear fed off each other. Those at the top pushed violence. Those beneath enabled it. And Sam became the target. Why? That remains unclear. Police have hinted at personal conflict, perhaps a breakup or betrayal that spiraled. Maybe Sam tried to leave. Maybe he saw or heard something he wasn't supposed to. Maybe he trusted the wrong person too long. But even those theories fall short of explaining what really happened. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about survival. It wasn't even about hiding a crime. What happened to Sam Nordquist seems to have been about one thing: control. Control taken to an extreme. And that leaves a chilling thought. If this group hadn't been stopped, if police hadn't eventually kicked down that door and started asking questions, would it have ever ended? Would Sam's story have just disappeared? In the coming days, prosecutors will attempt to answer those questions. But for now, there's one question echoing across the people who followed this case from the beginning. How many others knew and chose silence over intervention? The arrests have been made. The charges are severe. The public is watching. But even now, as the case moves slowly toward trial, major pieces of the story remain missing and deeply unsettling. Why did this group turn on Sam Nordquist? He wasn't an outsider. He was living with Precious Arzuaga. He had moved from Minnesota to New York in search of connection, of love. He trusted her enough to leave everything behind. So what changed? Was it one person who flipped? Was there a single event that escalated the violence? Or had it been planned from the start? We still don't know. The court documents name all 7 suspects. Their faces stare back from mugshots, some cold, some smirking. But none of them have told the full story. Not publicly. Not yet. The exact role each person played remains murky. Precious was at the center. But there were others, men and women, some in their 20s, others in their 30s and 40s. Some had prior convictions. One had a past involving child abuse. Another had been investigated for domestic violence. Who beat Sam? Who watched? Who fed him chemicals and burned his skin? Who tied him up? Who helped cover the bruises when social services came knocking? And who, if anyone, ever tried to stop it? No one has stepped forward to confess. Detectives believe more than one person participated in the physical abuse. But interviews suggest others simply stood by or helped conceal it. And that's just as damning. Sam was held for weeks. Every day, someone saw what he was going through. And every day, they let it continue. The DA's office is preparing for a complex trial. With 7 defendants, each represented by their own legal team, there's bound to be finger-pointing. Each suspect trying to shift blame. Some may turn on each other. Some may remain silent. But here's the chilling part. Investigators believe we haven't heard the worst yet. Court filings hint at photos, videos, text messages, digital evidence that has not yet been released to the public. Prosecutors are working to authenticate and catalog it all. But when that information is finally revealed in court, it may expose a darker, more coordinated effort than anyone expected. Sam's family, still grieving, has chosen to stay quiet ahead of trial. But privately, they say they want the truth, the full truth, no matter how ugly. Because what happened in room 22 wasn't just violence. It was betrayal. From people Sam knew. From people who could have helped him. And until every detail comes to light, one question will continue to haunt this case. How many times did Sam ask for help? And how many people ignored him? His name was Sam Nordquist. A son, a brother, a friend. A young man who loved helping others and once dreamed of becoming a therapist. He worked in a group home, offering care to people with disabilities. He moved through life quietly, gently, and he trusted easily, maybe too easily. He left Red Wing, Minnesota, looking for love. But in the small town of Geneva, New York, what he found instead was cruelty. Masked as companionship, disguised as affection, and hidden behind the door of room 22. What happened to Sam wasn't a single act of violence. It was sustained, prolonged, calculated, a form of torture most couldn't imagine, let alone endure. For weeks, he was humiliated, injured, and ultimately left to die. Not by strangers, but by people he lived with. The horror of his death shook the public. But it was the silence before it. The ignored emails, the declined welfare checks, the signs no one acted on. That left so many wondering. Could this have been prevented? 7 suspects now sit behind bars, facing charges that could lock them away for life. Some were friends. Others were family to each other. What united them in this crime is still being unraveled in court. But the evidence is mounting, and the prosecutors are confident. Justice will come. Still, justice alone can't undo what happened. Sam's death exposed more than individual cruelty. It revealed cracks in the system, a pattern of hesitation when it comes to protecting transgender victims, especially those navigating unstable relationships and unfamiliar environments. It highlighted the way society often fails people until it's too late. In the wake of Sam's story, advocacy groups have spoken out. Rallies were held. Online communities lit up. But as the headlines fade, there's a fear that Sam's name will too. That's why this story matters. Not just to document what happened, not just to analyze the trial, but to remember Sam, fully, honestly, and humanely. He wasn't a headline. He wasn't a case file. He was a 24-year-old with a soft voice and a big heart. A person who deserved safety, love, and the chance to keep growing into who he was meant to be. This series was made for that purpose, to say his name, to say it loudly so others don't get lost in silence, to say it clearly so no one forgets, to say it with hope that stories like his won't happen again. Rest in peace, Sam. You mattered. You still do. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Comment if you believe stories like Sam's must be told. Every voice that echoes his name pushes the silence back a little more.